Just after 3 a.m., James Harden found himself in handcuffs and headed to a Houston jail. Now, new details surrounding the arrest and the strict conditions of his release are starting to emerge. So what exactly happened that night? And why is the story still making headlines? Let's take a closer look. It was past 3 in the morning in downtown Houston. A Houston Police Department spokesperson confirmed that the arrest took place around 3 a.m. during a traffic stop at 1800 Crawford Street, located in the heart of downtown. The streets were quiet, and then a car got pulled over. When officers approached the vehicle, the driver identified himself as James Harden, and he was taken into custody just like that. According to Harris County court records, Harden was taken into custody at 3:41 a.m. when a handgun was observed on the seat of a car he owns. The gun was not holstered and was in plain view. Think about that for a second. Not tucked away, not hidden in a bag, sitting right there on the seat, out in the open, unholstered, where any officer approaching the vehicle could see it immediately. That's what made this an arrest and not just a warning. Officially, per the Harris County District Clerk's office, Harden was charged with UNL carrying weapon, gun in MV, unlawfully carrying a weapon in a motor vehicle. The charging document alleges that Harden had unlawfully, intentionally, and knowingly carried the weapon. That language matters. It's not a technicality buried in the fine print. That's the actual legal framing, intentional and knowing, sitting at the center of what Harden now has to answer for in court. He was booked into the Harris County Jail just before 5 a.m. on one count of unlawful carrying of a weapon, a Class A misdemeanor. He was booked at 4:57 a.m. and later released after paying a $100 bond. $100, that's what it cost one of the most well-paid athletes on the planet to walk out of that jail. But the charge doesn't disappear with the bond. Class A misdemeanors in Texas carry a maximum sentence of 1 year in county jail. So while the bond was pocket change, what's waiting on the other side of it absolutely is not. The former league MVP acknowledged the firearm belonged to him before being formally processed. No dispute, no confusion. The gun was his, the car was his, and now the charge is his too. His arraignment is scheduled for June 22, according to the clerk's office website. That's the next moment this story gets another chapter. Now, before we get into what the hours before the arrest looked like and what this charge means for Harden's immediate future, it's worth understanding exactly who this man is and why this particular night in this particular city cuts so deep. The arrest didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened after a night out in Houston, and the details of that night matter because they sketch the picture of exactly how James Harden ended up in the back of a police car in the early hours of a Saturday morning. According to the New York Post, Harden was at a Houston hookah lounge in a large group before the arrest. Not a quiet night in, not an early evening that wrapped before midnight. A hookah lounge, a large group, and then the streets of downtown Houston well past 3 in the morning. Reports from the New York Post indicate that Harden had been socializing at a Houston hookah lounge with a sizable group of companions in the hours preceding his detention. Now, this is the off-season. The season is over. There's no practice the next morning. In that sense, a night out with friends in your city isn't unusual for a 36-year-old who just finished a playoff run. What was unusual was what was sitting on the seat of his car when those blue lights came on. Houston holds particular significance for Harden, who spent 9 seasons playing for the Rockets. So this isn't some random city he found himself in. This is his city, the place that built his legend. The place where he became the MVP. The place where most people who recognize him on sight probably still think of him in a Rockets jersey. And it's the place where he's now listed as a resident in court documents, even as he plays his basketball 1,000 miles away in Cleveland. He came back to Houston, probably like he does most off-seasons, to decompress, to be around people he knows, to be somewhere comfortable. And somewhere along the route from that hookah lounge to wherever he was going next, a traffic stop unraveled all of it. He was accused of unlawfully, intentionally, and knowingly having a gun in his vehicle, which was unholstered and in plain view, according to a copy of the complaint obtained by the New York Post. The question nobody has fully answered yet is why the gun was sitting out like that. Was it a carry habit? Was it a security measure? A guy who travels with protection and simply didn't holster it? The court records don't contain any information on how Houston police officers found the gun, where exactly the arrest occurred, or other details surrounding the case. So the full context of that stop, what triggered it, whether there were other occupants in the vehicle, what the exact exchange was, remains publicly unknown for now. What is known is that the gun was visible. The officers saw it, and within minutes, Harden was in custody. The charge, based on the summary of the case, relates to the handgun not being properly holstered. That's the crux of it, not possession itself. Texas gun laws are famously permissive, but the manner of carrying an unholstered firearm in open view in a motor vehicle crosses a specific legal line in Harris County, and that line got crossed in the early hours of a Saturday morning in downtown Houston. Harden has no prior criminal record or arrest history. This wasn't a pattern. This wasn't a guy with a file. For all of the scrutiny that's followed him through multiple teams and multiple controversies over the years, his record coming into June 2026 was clean. That makes this his first real brush with the legal system, and it happened in a city that still loves him, in the middle of an off-season when everything should have been heading in a positive direction. To understand why this arrest hit different, why the internet erupted the moment it broke, you need to understand the weight of who James Harden actually is in the context of NBA history. James Harden is one of the best shooting guards in the history of the NBA, whose skill making three-point shots helped bring about a revolution in the way basketball is played. That's not a talking point. That's a documented shift in the sport. The game changed because of how he played it. His step-back three-pointer became hugely popular in the sport, and it dramatically increased the number of three-pointers taken and made across the entire league. Coaches started designing offenses around the step-back. Players started drilling it at every level. It's in the game now permanently because of him. In addition to winning 3 scoring titles, Harden was named the NBA's most valuable player in 2018. That MVP season in Houston was something else entirely. In the 2017-18 season, Harden scored 34 points and tallied 8 assists per game to win his first MVP award. He was the driving force behind Houston earning the top record in the NBA and the best record in franchise history that season at 65-17. 65 wins, best record in franchise history, MVP, scoring champion. All in one season, all in Houston. He's only the 3rd player in Rockets history to win the award, and the first since Hakeem Olajuwon won it in 1994. That's the kind of company he keeps. And then there's the sheer volume of it. He scored 36-1 and 34-3 points per game in the 2018 and 2019-20 seasons, respectively. Back-to-back-to-back years as the league's leading scorer. Seasons where you could set your calendar by how many points he'd drop on any given night. The step-back became a signature. The free throw line became his playground. The beard became a brand that stretched far beyond basketball. He spent 9 years in Houston with the Rockets, from 2012 to 2021. 9 years. That's not a pit stop. That's where he became him. The nightlife stories, the fashion, the star-studded circles, all of it got built in Houston. The city absorbed his personality, and he absorbed the city's. Then came the trade demand, then Brooklyn, then Philadelphia, and the very public and very bitter falling out with Daryl Morey. Then Los Angeles. Then, at the 2026 NBA trade deadline, Cleveland acquired him from the Los Angeles Clippers in exchange for Darius Garland and a second-round pick. A new chapter. A fresh start. And for a while, it was working. The Cleveland move was supposed to be the redemption arc, and in a lot of ways, it was right up until a Houston traffic stop rewrote the offseason story. Harden joined the Cavs at the trade deadline following a deal with the Clippers. He helped lead Cleveland to its first Eastern Conference Finals since LeBron James left in 2018. But the Cavs were swept by the New York Knicks. Let that land for a second. The first Eastern Conference Finals appearance in Cleveland since LeBron. That's not nothing. That's a franchise milestone, and Harden was a central piece of the team that got them there. The 2018 NBA MVP and 11-time NBA All-Star, averaged 25 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds per game for the Cavaliers during the regular season. Those are numbers that look like a man who still has gas in the tank. A 36-year-old who, when it matters, during the grind of 82 games, can still be a first-rate playmaker. But the playoffs were a different story. Against the Knicks, he averaged 16 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steals, and 0.5 blocks per game, while shooting 38.9% from the field and 17.9% from beyond the arc as New York swept Cleveland. 17.9% from three for a player whose entire identity, whose entire legacy is built on the three-point shot. That's a brutal number. The step back that changed basketball looked broken when the stakes were highest. So when Harden flew back to Houston to unwind after that sweep, the storyline surrounding him was already complicated. Was he still elite enough to justify a major deal? Was the playoff performance a blip or a sign? Did the Cavs still want him? And right in the middle of all that uncertainty, the arrest. Harden is potentially going to be a free agent at the end of the month. He has a $42 million player option decision he must make by June 29. But only $13.3 million of it is guaranteed. Read that again. He has a player option worth $42 million, but only $13.3 million is guaranteed. That means if he picks up the option, he's banking on the Cavaliers keeping him at the full value. If they don't, he walks away with the guaranteed portion. It had been expected that Harden would opt out of the contract and sign a new multi-year deal to remain in Cleveland, where he was traded in February. That was the plan before 3:41 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Now, that same decision hangs in the air with a criminal charge attached to the man making it. The timing could not be worse for Harden's contract situation. Teams negotiate based on every variable. Character clauses exist in NBA contracts for a reason, and even if this charge ultimately gets resolved quietly, even if Harden walks out of his June 22 court date with minimal consequences, the arrest itself is now a data point that every front office has to factor in. The Cavaliers, who were in contact with his representation from the moment the news broke, now have to sit with the question, does this change anything? There's what happened, and then there's what's happening now. Because the arrest isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a legal process that's going to follow James Harden into the next phase of his career. However that phase takes shape, Harden has a court appearance scheduled for 9 a.m. on Monday, June 22, according to court records. That's the arraignment. The moment where he formally enters a plea says the next setting will be held June 22, meaning a decision on further steps in this case will be considered then, and the conditions of his bond in the meantime. They're not light. The conditions of his release bar him from possessing any firearms, ammunition, or other weapons. He is additionally forbidden from consuming alcohol, controlled substances, or marijuana, unless prescribed by a medical professional, and he must undergo random drug testing. No weapons, no alcohol, random drug tests. For a man who's spent most of his adult life in the kind of social circles where late nights and hookah lounges are just Tuesday. Those are significant restrictions on day-to-day freedom. He was booked on one count of unlawful carrying of a weapon, a Class A misdemeanor. That's the top tier of misdemeanor offenses in Texas. Not a felony, but not a slap on the wrist either. Class A misdemeanors in Texas have a maximum sentence of 1 year in county jail. Now, first-time offenders with no criminal history, represented by competent counsel, rarely see the maximum. But that's the ceiling this charge carries, and Harden's legal team is going to have to work to keep that ceiling from becoming a floor. The Cavaliers' response was measured. The team confirmed the Cleveland Cavaliers are aware of the arrest of James Harden this morning and are in the process of gathering additional information. We are in contact with James and his representation and will continue to monitor developments as they become available. That's organizational language, designed to say something without saying anything. Gathering information is code for, we're figuring out what this means for us. Monitor developments is code for, "We're not making any moves until we know which way this is going to land." The Cavaliers aren't panicking publicly, but nobody in that front office is pretending this is a normal off-season week either. Harden's agent did not immediately respond to requests for comment, which tracks. In a situation like this, the legal team talks first, and the public-facing representation waits until there's a controlled message to deliver. So here's where everything stands. Harden has no prior criminal record or arrest history, which matters enormously in terms of how this charge is likely to be adjudicated. First-time offenders, especially on misdemeanor weapons charges tied to carrying rather than use, often have options: deferred adjudication, community service, a plea agreement that avoids a conviction on the permanent record. None of that is guaranteed, but it's the realistic landscape. What's less predictable is the contract dimension. Harden has a $42 million player option with the Cavaliers, but only $13.3 million is guaranteed, and reports have indicated that one way or another, he is likely to re-sign with Cleveland on a new deal. But likely before the arrest is a different calculation than likely after it. The Cavs saw what he did in the regular season: 25 points, 7 assists, the playoff run, and they were ready to build around him for another year, maybe two. Whether that calculus bends under the weight of a misdemeanor weapons charge and an arraignment date is the single biggest basketball question wrapped inside this legal one. What's clear is that this story doesn't resolve itself before June 22. The arraignment happens, a plea gets entered, lawyers negotiate, a process plays out, and the man at the center of all of it, the player who redefined the shooting guard position, who built his legend in the exact city where he just got arrested, who came so close to being the guy that brought Cleveland back to the finals, is going to have to navigate all of that while simultaneously deciding the next phase of his career. The arrest was 4 minutes past 3 a.m. on a Saturday. The car was his, the gun was his, the city was his, and now the consequences